to another week of In the Middle of Podcast, y'all. I am so excited for today's conversation. It is with just longtime friend, longtime mentor, someone who has impacted my life maybe in some of the most significant ways. But today I'm joined by Michael Head. Michael, say what's up.
I'm on. Man, I'm so excited, Darcy, to be here. Thank you for having me on. This is going to be awesome.
Absolutely. It's going to be so great. So if y'all tuned in to episode 1, you may remember. He did. He's the one that actually, before we hit record, he was like, I'm that guy that said this. And Michael, in my story, is the guy that got me to move out to Tennessee and recruited me to be a part of a residency program. And prior to that, him and his wife poured into my life since I was 11. He was my youth pastor, and just getting to see them have their whole family, Lucy, all the things, Lucy the dog. Follow her on
Lucy's
Instagram. Shout out. Yes. Not another kid, but kind of.
No.
The best people. The best people. And so I'm so excited for today's conversation. Michael is a huge advocate on just all the things of getting your priorities straight, mental health, talking about the hard things. He does not shy away from it. And he really helps you be able to identify it in your own life and realize, okay, now where do we go from here? But all through the person of Jesus, because that
Amen.
Really is who's leading and steering his life. So I'm excited for today's episode. And you may be wondering, what are y'all going to talk about? And I'm glad you asked.
I am
Michael,
what we're going to talk about.
Michael, I will tell you what we're going to talk about today.
Great.
Hopefully,
let's go.
We could. At the end of this, who knows? We could talk about outer space, but hopefully not.
We
might.
Whatever you want.
Probably not. But obviously, it's in the middle of podcasts, and in life, you just find yourself in the middle of so many different things. And I think for people sometimes, Michael, when they find themselves in the middle, it's not just like they wake up the next morning and they're out and they're on to the next, or at these landing page moments. And so today, my hope is to talk about what can you do for yourself, for your mental health, when you find yourself in just these funks of like, I don't really know what's next, but this is where I'm at, or just pulling themselves up out of a pit and like propping themselves up. Because I mean, for you, like, you're up and running almost every day at 5 a.m., like in the word. And so I know there's so much from your story that you've learned, but I don't know if you just have anything or any encouragement to speak to somebody who feels like that right now.
Well, I think before we get too much into like my story and the why, or I want to say the why. In Matthew 3:16, it says, as soon as Jesus was baptized, he went up out of the water. At that moment, heaven was opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and lighting on him. And then verse 17, and a voice from heaven said, this is my son, whom I love. With him, I am well pleased. Again, I want to just start with this, because this is where it should start for all of us. What's neat about this verse is Jesus was just baptized. He hadn't done anything like miraculous yet. He hadn't healed anybody. He hadn't walked on water. He hadn't done jack. Okay, he just doing life. 30 years old. He gets baptized, and when he comes up out of the water, what's neat is his father says this. And I don't know about you, but it's hard if you grew up in a family and you never heard, man, hey, good job, way to go, I love you. Because for me, I didn't really hear that ever. And so what did I do? I tried to do a lot of things so that people liked me and loved me. And me doing a lot of things ended up putting me into a deep, deep, deep depression. And in my doing, literally I almost killed myself in 2019, which praise the Lord. That's a awesome, powerful story of what God did there. But what we see God saying to his son right here is, I'm proud of you. He says, well done. He says, well done before Jesus did anything. He didn't say, well done, hey, way to heal these people. Well done, man, you walked on water. No, he said, well done before anything. And for me, what this says to me is this, man, we're not human doings. We are human beings. And so a part of who I am, and I mean, my habits and the different things that I do in my life, all I go back to this as much as I can. anything that I do is never, I mean, it's good. They're good things, but who am I inside? Who am I spiritually? Who am I physically? Who am I mentally? And so, um, and there are my daily habits and the things that I do. Truly, Darcy, I do those things to live. Here's what that means. I diagnosed with chronic or complex PTSD, depression, and anxiety, and some disassociation features. And every day I battle that. It's. I mean, I've worked hard on my mental health. I'm in counseling. I take some medication, and so I every single day I get up, I spend time with the Lord, and then I do some other things, some habits to help me to live.
That's so good. I want to talk about habits for a second. The other day, I had a student reach out to me and they said, "Hey, I am seeking to begin this habit of getting into my word in the morning." And it just kind of led me down this rabbit trail because as I texted back, I was like, I want to make this as practical as possible because I think sometimes for a lot of people, you'll see someone on Instagram living the life that you wish you were living, or you'll see someone in person and you're like, oh man, like that person's so fit, or that person has this all figured out. And you see the end goal, but you don't see like the process of getting there. And so
Yeah.
I just kind of want to tease that out for a second. For someone seeking to build habits in their life, where do you even begin?
So, for me, so I kind of told you the base, the foundation
Yeah.
is the being part, and for me, I was at a retreat, a staff retreat, January 2021, and a pastor came and spoke, and he was talking about getting up and running, and or getting up and reading and getting up and then running, and I was like, that's awesome, me too. But what I wasn't doing is I was getting up, and this is, I was a pastor on a church staff, and but I was not getting up and spending quality time with the Lord. I was getting up and running and doing things, and kind of saying, "Oh, I'm gonna listen to a podcast. I'm gonna pray when I run. I'm gonna listen to worship music," but I wasn't spending time with the Lord. And so that day, January 2021, Matthew 6:33 says, "Seek first the kingdom. Seek first the kingdom." And since that day, I decided I'm going to get up, and before I do anything else, I know this sounds like so basic to some of the Christians who are watching this, and you're amazing and better than me. But for me, it started in 2021, a serious daily time with the Lord. And here's what I think sometimes, Darcy. So we want to start habits, and again, this is my habit. Don't overcomplicate it. Make it easy. So don't, like, some people are like, I'm
That's
going to get
good.
up, I'm going to read the Bible for an hour, I'm going to journal a book, and then I'm going to launch doves out of my living room. No, 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 no. How about you just get up? How about you just get up, spend time in silence without not on our phones, and just pray and make that day one and be okay with it. And then day two, do this. Because habits, I think sometimes we want to hit the end goal, whatever that is, but we haven't even started. And it takes small
Mm.
steps so that we can actually start rolling. I don't know if that answers your question about practical,
Yeah,
but
no,
I would
it
encourage people,
does.
like, yeah,
It really does. And
the
what was your
the
encouragement to people? You're about to say
good.
something.
I don't remember. I
It's
don't remember.
okay.
But
Scrap
I would
it.
just, like for me, literally, Darcy, what I have found with this habit is I miss Jesus when I don't spend time with him.
Oh, I love that.
I
That's
have,
good.
and it's awesome. And I know, like, I'm like, something's, and I miss him. I miss my time. And so, are you, I would ask anybody watching this, have you ever been there? And if you're not, take small steps to get there,
That's
and
good.
it'll be a game changer.
That's so good. And I love what you said there, like you miss Jesus when you haven't spent time with him that day. And I can remember like specific seasons and times in my life where I'm like, I miss like how on fire for the mission of God I was. And I'll find myself like in these like slums or these divots of just life. And
Right.
continuing to like push into those habits even when your feelings are saying otherwise. For
Yeah.
you with like habits, have you felt that like feelings ever get in the way, and like how do you push back past those feelings?
I don't push past them. So like with the habit. So for me, in the morning, I wake up at 4:15. My alarm goes off. I have coffee that's preset to be brewed, and I go and I get it. I pour my coffee, sit in a certain chair. I have a certain lamp that Alexa turns on for me. I have a certain Bible that is it stays there all day. That's where it stays. And I have a journal. And so my habit is I sit down in the chair, I sit in silence, I read whatever I'm reading, and then I journal. So as you know, don't forget to write is like my podcast.
Yes.
There's a lot there with the don't forget to write. And so every day I don't forget to write. I don't forget to journal. And it's literally like, man, yesterday sucked. Or it's like, man, praise the Lord for what's happening, and I'm just writing whatever that may be. Um, and so let's say I do all that, and then typically I'll go on a run, and then the day starts coming, and you said how do I push past those feelings or those emotions that come up? What I've learned, Darcy, that if I do push past them, then I'm entering into depression, because
Mm,
depression is literally pushing down those things so that we can survive. I'm not saying that's
that's
bad. It's bad if we do it all the time.
yeah.
And so for me in the mental health world, I kind of know what's happening with my body. I know that sounds like in my body, I know what's happening, but I do. And so if I start feeling a certain way, if I'm triggered, whatever that may be, I'm able to recognize that and then work through it. So
That's huge. That's
um
good.
now that yes,
I
so
guess that's
and
yeah, a
there's a
better
lot
way of
there.
me
There's
rephrasing that. Yeah. Like to deal with the things, not just push past, but really identify, okay, this is where I'm at, and spending the time to do those things. At the beginning of this episode, one of the first like takeaways that I took from something you said was that we're human beings and not human doings. And I think sometimes with those two, it's hard to separate the two because they do sometimes just get so intertangled with each other. But how
Mhm.
can you and how do you separate who you are from what you do? Like not letting that thing be your identity, but knowing that, okay, like before I do anything, like you said with the first verse you mentioned, like I am a child of God and he's well pleased with me before I do anything today. And I
Right.
think that there's so much freedom in that verse, but to get to a place where you're like, okay, I more than just feel this, like I do believe this with my whole life that I am not what I do. My identity is separate from the work at hand. Because then sometimes you're in the middle and you're in a season, maybe like me or some people listening, where you're like, I don't have like a specific job or a specific thing that I'm doing, which can be a healthy place. But if you've been in a season
Right.
before, like I've been there, where you make your work your identity, then you get to these seasons and it's like this navigating of like, who am I? And to know who you
Right.
are, I feel like you've got to identify whose you are, but have you ever been there, and how have you learned to separate the two?
Yeah, so I'm there right now. I and we talked a little bit before, but just a few days ago, I resigned from being a pastor on at First Baptist Cleveland, Tennessee, and which is a big deal. So all I've known is full time vocational ministry for 24 years. Like you said, I've known you since you were 11. I'm like, so I was 12, and so I'm just like, so I resigned from that position. So in 2 weeks, I'm heading on. I'm starting a coaching, life coaching and business coaching, and just doing a lot of some YouTube stuff. I'm super excited about it. But
So
here's what
awesome.
I've learned in that. My identity 3 years ago, you would say, hey, so it's funny, Darcy, when you meet people, most of the time what people say, and everybody watching this right now, think about you're going up and talking to somebody and you've met them for the first time. Hey, my name is blank. And then what's the next question? Darcy,
What do you do?
can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you
That's
hear
it.
me?
So that is, yeah, I got you. So that is like everybody asks the question. So, hey, my name is Michael. Oh yeah, what do you do? And that instantly puts us into like, well, I'm a whatever. Man, we are not that. So yes, I was a
Mm.
pastor, but my title was not who I am. And it takes work. Like that's not just like because Darcy, for years, I was my title. I was those things. And what did I do? I worked really hard to make sure that I was that perfect preaching pastor that performed really good on the stages. And so how do you get to a point? Your original question was, what was it, Darce? I'm sorry.
How do you separate who
Trying to
you
go
are
back to,
from what you do?
yeah, how do you separate that? So it's being, uh, for me, for me, it's being real and it's being vulnerable. Because if you're not, let's say that you, I don't know, you work at a, I don't know, wherever you work somewhere, and you put on your work clothes and you go to work. If you change who you are from when you stepped out of your house to your car to your job, then you're not authentic. You're playing a role. Here's what our world needs. Our world needs people who have the same. They put on their work clothes, but all that is some clothes. It's not who they are. And when you're able to walk into spaces and you're able to be like, man, this is just I'm the same Michael, no matter where it is. And today I'm having a bad day, or today I'm having a great day. And I think sometimes people, they try to match what they do versus who they really are. And the thing is, it's okay to have bad days. Like I
Mm,
think sometimes we act like we have, if you have good days all the time, you're never going to have a good day. And so
that's good.
like there's going to be bad days, and those days lean into it. When someone asks you how you're doing, Darcy, you know this about me. When someone asks you how you're doing, what do you tell them? Do you
How
tell them,
you're actually
I'm
doing.
yeah, I'm like, let's just say, like, literally a few days ago, I have a dog. We had to put her down, had her for 16 years. Awful. If you would have asked me how I'm doing, let's say I went to the store after that, hey, how are you doing? I'll say I'm awful. Like I am not good. And sometimes I overshare and I get that. But for me, that helps me because I'm not gonna lie to you. You ask me how I'm doing, seriously, I'm gonna say, okay, good, or great. And that's my true authentic self. Like, and then sometimes people ask me how I do it. I'm like, I'm not good. And they're like, and people don't know what to do with that. They're like, oh, well, oh, let me pray for you. And it's like, no, I'm just not having a good day. It might get to here, or it will get to here eventually, but today it's here. So how do we separate it? Man, just be who you are. Like that's that's the best advice I can give. Guys, just know this. I'm not saying I have it all figured out and I'm perfect. Man, I mess up, I screw up, I I lie about how I'm doing, I guess. But I work really hard for those things because again, every day I am fighting to live. And so I want to be real with myself and with others around me.
That's so good. And yes, that's something that I remember from being in Tennessee when all the residents came in. I mean, I already knew this about you, but people got to learn how you doing and oh, I'm great. And you're like, Darcy, go figure it out. Like, how are they?
Yeah, they lie.
and
They're
but
lying.
and it's so interesting too because our like just everyone you cross paths with, if you do tell them I'm not, I'm okay. Like yesterday I was with some friends at a football game or something like that, and someone was like, how you doing? Like one of my really good friends, and I was just like, I'm okay. And they're shocked because they know me to be this super upbeat, positive, joyful person. And it's like, I still am that joyful person. Like I have had
That's
joy
right.
like throughout this whole season of just what to some people looks like a sea of confusion. And I'm not going to say that the water's clear and I know exactly what I'm doing, but like I know who God is and what he's done before. And because of that, like I'm okay and I still have joy.
Right.
Like, am I great?
That's right.
Sometimes, but the
Right.
reality is like there's just stuff that I'm figuring out on my own agenda that I'm like, okay, moving on with this. And so that also made me just think about too. I got in the conversation with a friend about letting our yeses be yeses and our nos be nos. And one thing that's a little true of me is when someone asks me to do something, I love to say yes, and saying no for me is really hard. And I think that that's like a very much like a learned thing. And Michael, I don't know if that's something that you have mastered, but I don't know if there's any truth that you just want to speak into there of like why it's important to like say the right yeses and the right nos, and how to get to a place where you can identify like, I think I should say no, or okay, I could say a full
Right.
yes.
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, that is like because everybody wants to please whoever that is. I mean, I don't say everybody, but that's just we want to do that. And so when somebody asks us something, for me, I put it through the filter of like, who is this? So if I don't have a boss anymore, so that's crazy. The Lord is my boss, like you said in your podcast. But like let's say my boss asked me to do something. Okay, now I don't really have the no, I mean, you gotta like play that by ear. But let's say that somebody asks you to do something, and your natural response is yes. Here's what I encourage you to do. This goes along with when somebody asks you how you're doing. Let's just say somebody asks you how you're doing, and you say yes. In your mind, maybe now, if you're watching this, you might filter that, be like, I'm not. Here's what I encourage you to do. You want to freak them out, which I love doing. You be like, hey, I'm lying. I'm really not doing too good. Okay, so what that does for me, and look, I'm not really concerned about them at the time. I'm really doing that for myself, and it reaches people. So, hey, how are you doing, man? You say, or I'm sorry, hey, can you do this for me? Your answer is yes or no. Here's you just have to be honest and real. Let your no be no. Here's why. No is a complete sentence. Here's what I mean by that. When somebody asks you something and you say no, typically we put a comma on it. We say, no, I've got to feed my birds or whatever. No, weird, my grandma's been dead for 40 years, but she called me. I got to go, like we start like spinning all these things like no, but no. It's just no, period. And let it sit. Like just stop, like no, and then just let them kind of, oh, okay. Usually people are like, oh, okay, no problem. Now if it is like your wife, your spouse, guys, be careful. Like like that's, use no correctly, but use no to save your time. Because when you're saying yes to everything, you're saying no to something else. So
That's
let
true.
your no be your no.
That's true. I have a friend who does this so well. And it's just so funny because we know when we ask this person, hey, do you want to hang out? Or hey, do you want to go eat lunch with us? Or whatever it is, if there's like a group, and you ask, you're going to get a yes or you're going to get a no. And they mean it. And for me, sometimes I'm like,
It's awesome.
no, well, okay. And then you're so right. We end up
I'm with
sacrificing
you.
something else.
Yeah.
Like, like
Yeah.
I think the thing that sometimes you sacrifice a ton of if you've got a bunch of free time is like you sacrifice rest. I actually had a mentor get on to me the other day
Yes.
because if you listen to episode 1, I mean, part of how I described my season just from a complete overview is this summer was time of rest and to Sabbath and to pray. And they called me and they were like, hey, though some of this may be true for like some of the days of summer, it's like you really didn't like completely Sabbath in all the ways that you should have. And so I want to do better and like paint a clear picture of like how can we rest well? Sure, you might not be able to just pull out your sabbatical card and be like, okay, work, I need 4 weeks. Though that would be really healthy. It's
Right.
just not practical
Right.
always. And so how can
Right.
people make rest a priority? Like if they're prioritizing these other things, I think rest has got to be something too of like it's just as important as these other habits, and you've got to get into a place of making it a habit.
How to make rest a habit?
Yep.
Is that's what you're asking ultimately? Yeah, I think.
Yep.
I mentioned I go to bed or I wake up at 4:15, and and that's early, and I love it because the world is sleeping. And but I also go to bed. I go to bed early. I don't stay up watching all these things. I don't stay up on my phone doing these things. Now, college football's kind of jacked me up a little bit because there's
So
some late
real.
games, and I'm like, but I try to stay disciplined in that because I know how important the morning is for my life. And so when you're continuing to say yes to a lot of things, here's what people do. I'm just, you ask people, man, it's just a busy season. It's a busy season. I'm like, bro, you were in that season like 3 years ago. Are you? That's a long season. Like seasons come and seasons go. We don't stay in the season. So if you're
Mm.
one of those, I'm busy all the time. That's just kind of your go to. And I would encourage you strongly to find some rest. Anytime Jesus went out and did something great, what did he do before that? He rested. He 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 chilled, and then he went and did something Jesus-y. He went and crushed it somewhere. And so,
Mm-hmm.
man, I encourage you to find rest. And so for me, I'm married. I've got 4 kids, and I did have a full-time job, and, but I guess I still do have a full-time job. It's just a new job, and but I'm also modeling to my kids that our life is not busy. Just because the other families are going and going and going doesn't mean we're going to go 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 go. It's just not going to happen. And so I encourage you. Most of the time, people are so tired because they've stayed up so late, and then you wake up and you think, I'm going to bed earlier tomorrow night. And then what do? You don't do it. And then you're so tired. And I think the
Yeah,
enemy wants to use our tiredness too, Darce. I do. The enemy wants to destroy us when we are exhausted because our mind is not straight.
I agree with that. And I think so much too reminds me just of this quote. This can't be coined by one point person. I've heard so many people say it over the years, but that discipline breeds freedom. And that for me has been so huge because a lot of my life is spontaneous and some people dare to say adventurous. And I'm like, it's not really that adventurous. Like I'm just in Katy, Texas, but okay. Um,
Go with it.
sure. But they're like, it's so spontaneous. And I'm like, is it really? Like, I don't know. But I think that discipline in our lives does allow us to have time for the right things. And two, just
Yes.
a note for the people listening that are like, okay, well, rest, unpack that a little bit. It's like rest for Jesus. Like, you don't read in scripture and then he went and took a nap. Like, rest really looks like time with the Father. And rest also, too, looks like getting the right amount of physical sleep at night because I love it's not me that made this up, but I heard it and so I'm going to repeat it. And when we rest at night, when we sleep physically, like it's cool because you're at this place like you're fully human. You can't just keep powering through and doing life. Like you're not God, you're not that powerful. And so when you sleep, it's like it's you don't think about it because most of the times you're so tired you hit your head hits a pillow and you're out. But it really is like trust of like God's taking care of so much right now as you sleep or as you rest. And then even too with like
Yes.
genuine rest or
Yes.
seasons of rest. I told this to a friend the other day. They're like, I don't know what's next in my life. Like there's so much God's hit pause on or so much that I can't I feel like there's this horizon and I can't really see past it. Like I see the things in front of me, but like beyond it, I don't see anything else. And I was like, well, maybe it's so that God is behind the scenes pulling levers on your behalf. Because if there is one thing to be true about the Lord, He is working on your behalf. He is for you, your biggest fan. And He's so behind the scenes doing things that you never even thought possible. I mean, that's so much of my story. Like, if you would have
It
told
is. I'm
me
proud.
you're going to go to Texas A&M and then you'll stay in contact with people who heavily impacted your life and you'll get to the decision of moving to Tennessee and staying, I would have been like, you're crazy. And people, when I made the decision, told me, you're crazy. But I look
Right.
back at
Right.
it
Right.
and I would change
Mm-mm.
none of it. Like,
Right.
there
So
are
good.
I mean, there's students in my phone from Tennessee this morning that are like, hey, what's up? And so
Praise the
no
Lord.
matter what it is that your pathway is, like, even if you feel like you're in a place of choosing wrong, just take a step and surrender that to the Lord and let him continue to use it, because you're not powerful enough to mess up God's plan. But I do think that we have things in front of us that we need to do a good job stewarding. And those are some of the practical things, and really simplifying our lives. Like, it's not that complicated.
Right.
And to get to a place of like, okay, what matters? And that's something that I see so beautifully done in your life. Like, you prioritize your mental health, your family, Lucy, your dog.
Yep.
Y'all,
Yep,
okay,
she's
story
enjoying it.
time. So when I was in Tennessee, okay, this is also for any single people listening to this podcast, maybe you relate to me. But you're always the appointed dog sitter. It's like, oh,
That's
what
true.
are they doing? They're
That's true.
free. They're dog
That
sitting.
yes.
Or babysitting, you and Evan. So I would just dog sit, babysit any time that I was free. My no's weren't no's; they were just yeses all the time. And so I would dog sit their dog, Lucy. Y'all,
Yeah.
this dog,
Yes.
when you take her outside, if she sees a bunny, a squirrel, you name it, a Sasquatch, she's
A
gone
human.
forever. Forever.
No, not forever. No, not forever. That'd be a bad day if she was gone forever.
I mean, there's some minutes that went by. I was like, Lucy, bring it on home. It is
awesome.
the morning. Anyways, but that's a good word, Michael. Well, hey, I am so thankful that you were on the podcast today. And I just know that there is so much for people to take away from this episode, and just truth and wisdom and just practical pieces they can apply into their everyday lives. Because I think it's true for anybody listening, whether you feel like you've got it all figured out, which even the people that you're like, oh, they've got it all figured out, I guarantee you they don't feel that way. No. And you're always going to be in the middle of something. Michael, I don't know if there's anything else you want to leave the people with, but
I've got one thing for being in the middle is this. I love what you said, Darcy, about just going with his path. And maybe you're watching this like, I don't know this Jesus. I don't know what's going on. I would encourage you to reach out to myself or Darcy. We would love to talk to you about taking those steps. But I would say this, no matter who you are, just know this. If you're in the middle, sometimes you got to take 2 steps forward and 1 step back. And in that, you kind of feel like, oh, and that can be like in your mind, that's a negative. Let me remind you, when you're in the middle and you've taken 2 steps forward and 1 step back, you're still moving forward. And so keep taking those steps. Get the noise out of your head, get the people out of your mind, and you do what God has planned for you to do. And there's peace in that, and it's going to be hard, but I promise you, like Darcy is saying, and like Darcy is doing, this may not look like Darcy had planned out to be, but I promise you, like she said, the joy, man, that's not going to go away because you're following what God has for you. And it's so awesome. So, man, Darcy, thanks for having me. I love you. I love what God's going to do through you. And I'm here. I'm a supporter. I'm your biggest subscriber. So let's go.
Thanks for being on. Well, in the middle of the podcast, we will see you next Tuesday. Hope you'll have a great day.